Every car person has one similar story. It's that thing that caused you to go from looking at cars like these random boxes around you to something you needed.
The one car that warped my young brain was the Ferrari Testarossa. If I could buy one, I'd own a Ferrari Testarossa, but I can't. And the one car that I can that gives me the same feeling is the Porsche 928.
For me, it was this, the Jaguar E-Type, the XKE. Look at it, it's spectacular. The XKE was the beginning, and now I'm memorizing stats and making wish lists and staring at posters on the wall until I could finally afford one, and that's this, the Nissan 300ZX.
Both Todd and I have the 928 and the Z car back in our lives. We've owned them before. They're the origin cars, the two cars that we owned when we started the show. But now they're being compared directly to the two cars, the Muse cars that started it all for us.
That's inspiration, that's realization, and they're both here, and I get to drive them both in the same day.
You're watching Everyday Driver. We make a TV show, podcast, and YouTube channels dedicated to great cars, driving adventures, and helping you find a car you'll love.
Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss a thing.
I'm driving this car. Wow. There's a smell in every Jaguar E-Type that I remember. I have a scent memory of being in one of these cars, and every time I sit in one, it's so powerful and it takes me back to when I was a kid. This is the beginning of my car love, and I didn't even fully understand it. All I knew was my father owned a string of boring American cars, and then he had two of these, two of them. The second one he sold when I was about 11 or 12 years old. I was a few years away from driving. Introduced in 1961 to kind of universal acclaim, the E-Type is still considered one of the most attractive cars ever made, and are you surprised? Look at this. I didn't know any of that when my dad had one. I had no idea that this car was significant beyond the fact that it just captured my imagination. This is a 1968 completely stock, numbers matching car. And I have so many visual memories of being in this car. I remember being obsessed with the switches across the dash. I remember staring at the actual latch and the window winder and the amazing hook that actually holds the hood down. I remember staring at those things. I have visual memories of just looking at those. Why? Well, I was low in the seat. Because this is in the dark ages of childcare as far as child safety in cars is concerned. There was no booster seat here. That wasn't happening. I could barely see over the edge of the door, but I couldn't see over the dash. I couldn't see forward. I was too small. Of course, I had no idea how it drove. When you're a kid, you never think about the fact of, will the car fit me? There's no concept of, I will get too big for that. That doesn't exist yet. You want to get bigger. Ironically, now I'm tall enough that I have to crouch to fit. I mean, I could sit up straight, and now I'm looking over the top of the windshield. This is not about going fast. This car, okay, in its day was fast. It's a 4-speed gearbox. You can't shift very quickly. They are 7-second cars, 0 to 60, which when you consider the 1960s, that's not slow. It's got a straight 6, it's got 265 horsepower. It had between 240 and 280 pound-feet of torque, depending upon the year that you had. I know I'm going 70-ish. The needle is bouncing a bit, but I don't care. This is a 2,800 pound car, so there's not a lot of weight to begin with. but the nose directly follows the tiniest steering angle. There's no dead spot here. Everything feels perfectly mechanically bolted together, and as a result, the biggest thing I feel in driving this is a delicacy. It feels not fragile, you understand, it feels delicate. Everything here is fingertip. Obviously, all manual steering with this great wooden wheel. When I was a kid, I hated this wheel. Now, stepping into it and actually feeling how that transmits information, it's like the old 911s were the same way. It gives you so much texture of the road and what the car's doing. And it lightens up so wonderfully when you drive the car at speed. This is one of those cars that you get in and it helps you forget everything else because it needs you. It wants you to be involved. It needs you to be active with the steering and the shifter and the noises and the fact that everything has to be coaxed a little bit. As a result, you quickly are in a situation where everything else just goes. And I'm now aware of how gorgeous everything is, how gorgeous this car is. I'm going quickly, but I don't need to worry about how fast is this. It doesn't matter. My biggest struggle right now is the fact that as soon as I drive the car back, I'm done. I don't get to drive it anymore. And I don't want to take it back yet. I don't want to be done.
Passive safety. Yep, there we go. The steering wheel points at my left ear. My feet are all the way over to the right. The pedals are a little bit too close together, and I'm leaned way too far back. I'm too big for this cabin. It's almost like there isn't a word for ergonomics in Italian. Look at the shape, look at the proportions, look at the details, look at the sizes of everything. To me, it's so wide it seems illegal. It's almost twice as wide as it is tall. Those proportions will never be done again. At the time, this was very much a pinnacle of luxury. Nowadays, it seems Spartan, it seems barren in here. It's just simple panels, coated in leather, and I love this thing. This is a 1990 Testarossa, so it's got the double mirrors now, a few upgrades. That long front overhang with the wheels pushed all the way back to my feet, that's how you can get that nose to drop way to nothing. I can't see a thing. All I can see is steering wheel, a little bit of the top of the instrument panel, and road. 385 horsepower out of a nearly 5-liter flat 12 engine. It's so special. I guess I've always liked flat configurations, flat engines. 354 pound-feet of torque, and it sounds so good. I want to bottle the noise into liquid form and pump it into my veins. Listen to that. What a spectacular car. What other car clicks into gear when you shift it? There's so much information, and you would think that the shift lever would be flimsy and terrible, and it is perfection. A gated shifter nowadays is a priceless work of art. Rolling onto the throttle out of a corner. Going to fourth. And there's the speed. This is the sensation that I thought it would give me as a kid, and I was right. It's everything all at once. All those senses being paid attention to in every category. It has that mid-engine feel, and it lightens up the faster you go. Absolutely it does. It's right about 3,300 pounds. It feels heavier initially when you start driving it, and then it comes to life. And I understand why it doesn't have power steering. I don't want power steering in this car. The steering ratio seems slower to me, but I can feel so much of the road presence. I can feel the asphalt, I can feel the texture. I think Testarossas have this perception of, because they are a GT car, that they're a little bit filtered. They seem fast and they're good looking, but there's a lot of filters, and that is not the case. There is a car for every enthusiast that stirs something deep inside you that you didn't know existed. I had never felt desire until I discovered the Ferrari Testarossa. I was right. My kid instincts were right.
Everyday Driver is brought to you by Covercraft. Use the code EVERYDAY21 for 10% off your order.
You remember that line by Tom Cruise in the movie Risky Business, Porsche, there is no substitute? Well, I wanted to drive a car for which there was no substitute. I wanted to own that car. The 928 is the car that did me in. It was because I loved the shape. This was going to be the car to replace the 911 until every 911 enthusiast screamed. And this car never really caught on, even though somewhere around 60,000 cars that Porsche built of the 928 in its entire run from 79 all the way to 95. Not everybody liked the styling, but I fell in love with it. Now, the downfall of these cars were 80s plastics. Yeah, it's not leather coated, it's the vinyl, and things bubbled and the dash cracked. That was a known thing, but I don't care about any of that stuff. In 1983, this got a little bit of an update. The engine was enlarged to 4.7 liters from 4.5. It was now up to 234 horsepower, 263 pound-feet of torque out of the 90-degree V8. It's pretty wide open V to fit down low in this very low nose. Time to wind it out a little bit. There we go. Nothing sounds like a Porsche V8. This is also not a car to be hurried through gears. This is a car that is made to be enjoyed through each shift. And what was interesting is Porsche decided that most 928s were going to be automatics. So it's rare to find a manual transmission 928. When you do, buy one. Buy it. It feels heavy at first, and the steering has got a lot of weight to it. It's not a crisp, nimble, all the road feel there, but the attitude of the car is so different. Only weighs 3,300 pounds, and I say only, which is still kind of heavy for a sports car, but for modern cars, that's pretty lightweight. But the most unique part of the 928 is the Weissach rear axle. It acts like passive rear steering. It's engineered so when you got compression through a corner and you put load on it, it artificially creates more toe-in to generate more lateral grip. And you go faster through the corner. That's what a good GT car should do, and that was its party trick. Driving the 928 is almost like playing a musical instrument. You can't believe that something so overly complex just nails it. When you ask it to do something and you get it right and it responds, that's what driving a 928 feels like. No, it doesn't have the quickest steering ratio. No, it's not a Cayman. It doesn't do magical things through corners. This car, it is under my skin.
There was a 300ZX in the late 80s, but when this one, the Z32 chassis, dropped, It was a revelation. This had a similar impact to the car market, to the E-Type 30 years prior. Everybody kind of stopped and went, wait, what kind of car is that? The E-Type at this point was long gone in my life, but here was a brand new car that honestly, I liked this more than the Lamborghinis and Ferraris of the day. And when I finally got one, it wasn't even the one I really wanted. It was automatic and it was a non-turbo. It was the first good sports car I'd ever owned. So many firsts in that car, including the first car I ever went out and drove just for fun. The Nissan Z-Car styling, or the Datsun, was originally inspired by the E-Type, that long nose and small cabin at the back. With this generation, they totally threw that out. It looks like a mid-engine car, and it's still a front-engine car. To this day, 30 years later, this is still a styling that stops people, just like that E-Type. These were 300 horsepower from the factory, 280 pound-feet of torque. Now this one is mine, and it happens to have a very standard tune on it that makes it about 350, 360 horsepower. Doesn't matter. In stock form, they were still quick. 0 to 60 is now down to about 5 seconds, which is still somewhat competitive today. It feels like there's this surge, like a wave that builds behind you, and you're suddenly a surfer, and this wave got quite big. I find myself going genuinely fast on this road. Now, part of it is I'm not exposed to the elements. And I could be. I could take the T-tops off. T-tops! It's the 90s! An adjustable suspension system, sport and touring. That's on everything now. You could get it on nothing then. 30 years later, this chassis, this tuning, the way the steering and rotation happen, all of that holds up. Now, it's been surpassed. There are sharper, lighter things. This is a 3,500 pound car with all this technology on it. That's a pretty heavy car. There isn't the delicate feel that there was in the E-Type. This is a hydraulic rack, and it actually is turning the back wheels too. You give it gas, and the HICA system is working. You can just feel the car just dart around the corner. So now I come back to it a decade later with all of the other cars we've driven. And it feels old school. It feels like the classic car it is, but it doesn't feel bad. It doesn't feel like the dynamics are old. It just feels like the interactions are from a totally different time in thinking, because we've moved way past this in technology and safety. It's funny to drive this and to realize I know why I've owned two. I know why I bought one again. Because it's really good. It's held up very well, while still feeling old school. That's very cool. People that don't like cars, I feel like have just never had this moment. They never had the moment that pushes cars from just a tool into an object you love. This car will always have this place in my life. It will always have this inspiration history, and it drives wonderfully. Don't know if I'll ever own one, but this is special.
I knew I'd like it, but I thought I would like it because of its era and because I liked it then as a kid. But I like it even more now. It has more power. It feels faster than I thought it did. The shifts, the engagement. This is just about driving and that's it. It's far more fascinating and delicious than I ever thought. There's through lines, there's commonalities to each of these cars for me. And it all hinges on emotion. It's history, it's passion, it's emotion for driving, for the noises they make, and for the style. I was right. Even as a kid, I identified that.
This is the car that took me from an observer, a passionate, excited observer of cars, to a driver, to a person who couldn't wait to get out and just do 100 miles because it's Sunday. When I first had one of these, I owned it for a decade. I used it for everything. I used it until my son was born, and I used to take him in a rear-facing child seat in the passenger seat of this car. At the time, I didn't think it was making an impression, but when I bought this car again, he climbed into it and he said, "Dad, did this one smell like the old one?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, I remember this smell.
So strive to find one of these, whatever that is, a car that makes you feel this in your life. Yeah, there's gonna be cost. Yeah, things will break. Yes, you're gonna get pissed off and frustrated at them. But when it's running right, and you've got moments like these, this is why we're car enthusiasts, and this is why I do this show.